Welcome to another wonderful Susannah Calloway audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean Western romance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Susannah Calloway, Western romance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. The Saloon Owner's Bride. Chapter 1. The huge filthy hog, its body swaying side to side, rumbled towards her, its eyes wide with terror. Mattie, reacting instinctively, ducked to the side and clutched her brown parcel of groceries more tightly. A group of street urchins passed, shouting obscenities at the hog and laughing raucously. A stink followed them. Already exhausted, Mattie crossed the road to keep from inhaling the foul smell of the hog and to stay out of the urchins' way. Safely on the other side, she paused to catch her breath. It was 5 p.m, and the streets were crowded. Someone whistled, catching her attention. "Hey there, pretty lady, ready for my lovin' now? Come on over here." A disheveled man stood at the entrance of a tavern, blowing circles of smoke and gawking at her. She pulled her shawl tighter and hurried away. "Don't run off, love. I been waitin' for ya," his voice trailed after her. Tears of humiliation flooded Mattie's eyes. She felt dirty and as if she'd been spied on through a slit in the curtains. She detested New York. How she missed Joseph. Before his death, they had lived in Jackson, a small town north of the city. There, the men had been respectful of ladies, and she had known almost everyone personally. A biting wind cut through her thin garments as she hurried, head bowed, toward South Street. Her parents' home was the fourth in the row of clapboard houses. She ran the last distance to the door. "Who's chasing you?" her pa called from where he sat by the fire, a Bible in his hands. Mattie shook her head. "No one. I just wanted to get away from the cold. Where's Ma and Catherine?" She shook off her damp shawl and hung it on a nailed peg behind the door. "In the kitchen," Pa said, returning to his reading. The kitchen was small and welcoming with the fire from the stove warming it up. The sweet smell of cinnamon that her mother always put in her tea wafted to Mattie's nose. "Ma," Catherine cried, running to Mattie and throwing her arms around her waist. Mattie wrapped one arm around her daughter's slender 6-year-old body. "Let your mother sit herself down, child. This is no weather to be out washing people's laundry," Mattie's ma said. Mattie dropped the parcel of groceries on the kitchen table. She smiled wanly. They had carried out this discussion many times. Her mother frowned. "And you shouldn't have bought those. Your pa and I can afford to feed you and Catherine." "I know, Ma, but I wanted to," Mattie said. "Catherine, go on and play in our room. I want to speak to your grandmother alone for just a moment." "I'll be in directly." Her mother plunked a cup of tea in front of her, and Mattie gratefully wrapped her hands around it. "What is it, dear?" Ma asked, concern deepening the lines on her forehead. "I've given a lot of thought to that advertisement, and I think I'll accept the proposal. I'll go to the mail-order bride service office tomorrow and make the arrangements," Mattie said. Saying the words brought a fresh wave of terror to Mattie. In the last few days, she had weighed the advantages for herself and Catherine if she decided to wed Mr. Richard Dixon, out west. She still felt conflicted, but the drunken man outside the tavern today had been the final shove she needed to realize there was no future for her and Catherine in New York. Ma clapped her hands together. "Good. It's a wise decision. New York has changed so much, and it just ain't the right place to raise a child. I know the Lord has a good plan for you. You just have to place your trust in Him, daughter." Mattie nodded. She had read the man's advert over and over again in the last week, so much so that it was imprinted on her brain. He described himself as a reputable man who owned property in Plum River, Wyoming. She had no idea where that was, but it sounded nice enough. A soft knock on the back door interrupted her thoughts. Her mother pushed herself up from the chair, huffing as she went to answer it. Mattie's heart twisted. Her mother was growing old, and despite the woman's assurances that she and her father could afford to feed them, Mattie knew it was a struggle on Pa's small, erratic monthly pension. Mattie downed her remaining tea in one gulp. Her hands trembled slightly, and she knew why. Despite the decision she had just made, the thought of traveling across the country to marry a stranger terrified her. So many questions whirled in her mind. Was he kind? Was he a good Christian man? Was he honest? Ma returned a few minutes later, a grin on her face. "The Lord sure works in miraculous ways," she said, her watery blue eyes twinkling. That was Mrs. Moore, from next door. She has an aging aunt staying with her who doesn't want to return to her own home. Says it's too lonely. Mrs. Moore doesn't have the space for her to stay permanently. You know she minds her grandchildren. Anyway, she thought to ask me if I can take on her aunt as a boarder. Her aunt won't have a problem paying as her husband left her a goodly amount of funds. I told her I'd speak with your pa, and we'll go and meet the lady tomorrow." Mattie's eyes widened. "You won't mind living with a stranger?" "She won't be a stranger for long, now, will she?" Ma quipped. "Besides, I could do with the company now that you and Catherine will be leaving. You know your pa ain't the most talkative of people." However, the most important reason sat between them, unspoken. The woman's rent would come in handy. Mighty handy, considering they'd lose the small wage Mattie brought in. If there were any lingering doubts as to whether she and Catherine should go to Wyoming, the decision had just been made. Mattie prayed it was the right thing to do. She rubbed her tight forehead. A headache was beginning to form. Her gaze met her mother's. "I'm frightened," she said softly. "I know you are," her ma replied in a soothing voice. But fear never got anyone anywhere. Chapter 2. Towns and cities merged into one as the train snaked its way towards the west. Mattie's eyes ached, but her restless mind would not allow her to sleep. She pushed back the few strands of hair resting on Catherine's forehead, grateful that her daughter had fallen asleep. The last 5 days had been too much for Catherine, the fascination of being on a train having worn off long before. "Plum River Depot," the train conductor shouted, striding into the car. Mattie's insides tightened. She gently shook Catherine awake. Rubbing her eyes, Catherine turned her still sleepy eyes to her. "We're here, Catherine," Mattie said, hoping her voice sounded reassuring. "Listen, the train is slowing down." The wheels grated and squealed on the tracks as the train prepared to stop. Fishing a comb from her handbag, Mattie ran it through Catherine's wild curls and then her own, readying their hair in ribbons. Their clothing was wrinkled, but there was nothing to be done for it as they had already changed clothes thrice. "Let's go, little one," Mattie said to the now wide-awake girl as the train came to a screeching halt, and the doors were opened. Her heart pounding, Mattie stepped down onto the platform and into a violent gust of wind. She held Catherine's hand tightly and bowed her head to protect her face from a cloud of dust. When it cleared, she looked up to a towering giant of a man, who was peering down at her before his eyes switched to Catherine. He wore no hat, and his mass of brown hair blew in the wind. "Miss Simpson?" he asked, his voice guttural. Mattie's heart flipped. She had pictured him as a nondescript, pleasant-looking man. The man who stood before her was ruggedly handsome, his brown eyes intense as they probed her face. "Yes, that is me, and this here is my daughter, Catherine Simpson," Mattie said, her voice not as strong as she would have wished it to be. His face broke into a smile that completely disarmed her. "Well," he bellowed. "It is a pleasure to meet you. I'm Richard Dixon, and you ladies are welcome to Plum River. Call me Richard." Mattie flashed him a genuine smile. Warmth swirled through her at his enthusiastic reception. "Thank you, Richard," Mattie said, surprised at her own reaction to this man she was meeting for the first time. She followed him to the baggage car where he easily carried their 2 cases in his large hands. Mattie held Catherine's hand as they left the depot and turned to the left. "I have booked you ladies a room at the boarding house," Richard told them. "Thank you," Mattie said with a smile. "That was very thoughtful of you." He glanced at her sideways, and with a grin, he led the way up the steps of a wooden structure. He rang the bell and waited. "Are they here?" a woman's voice called out before the door opened completely, revealing a short, smiling middle-aged woman, her head covered by a white bonnet. "They are here, Mrs. Rudolph." Richard beamed. "Come in, my dears," the cheery woman said. "I'll show you to your room. Peter will bring in your luggage. I'll wait for you here while you freshen up, and then I can take you to see my home," Richard said. Mattie nodded and followed Mrs. Rudolph into a small hallway and up a flight of wooden stairs. "Your room is on the second floor," she said. "Mr. Richard insisted you were to have the best room available." A lightness filled Mattie's limbs as Mrs. Rudolph opened the first door to the left of the landing. Mattie had made the right decision in accepting Richard Dixon's proposal. She just knew it. "Now, my dears, make yourselves at home," Mrs. Rudolph continued in a jolly way. "There are some pleasant people in the house if you feel sociable, which I doubt after your long trip." There was laughter in her voice. "Thank you so kindly. Catherine and I will be very comfortable here." Mattie waited for the door to shut behind them before looking around. Light flooded the room from a window that looked out to a swift-flowing stream. "Ma, is this where we'll sleep?" Catherine asked. "Yes, do you like it?" Catherine solemnly took in the large bed, the chest of drawers and basin, and then nodded. Relief flooded Mattie. She had prayed Catherine would take to their new life. "I do like it," Catherine said and lit the room with her smile. "We need to wash up." "Mr. Dixon is waiting for us," Mattie told her, opening up one of their cases to pull out fresh clothes. "Will you marry him, Ma?" Catherine asked, bouncing on the bed. Mattie's belly fluttered. "Let's get to know him first, shall we?" "I like him," Catherine declared, and Mattie laughed. "I like him, too." 10 minutes later, after a quick cleanup and a change of clothes, Mattie and Catherine made their way down the stairs. A fresh wave of pleasure hit Mattie as she took in his muscular frame leaning against the door. "Can I hold your hand, Missy?" he asked Catherine, and she immediately let go of Mattie's hand and took Richard's. To Mattie, he held out his elbow, and she tucked her hand in. "I reckon you'll grow to love Plum River," he said. "The folks here are simple and most are all right. A little persnickety, maybe, but that's expected as it's a small town." "You know everyone in Plum River?" Mattie asked. "More or less," Richard said. "Mind you, I didn't say I was friendly with all folk," he added with a boisterous laugh. "I used to live in a small town before Catherine and I moved to New York," Mattie told him. "I'm sure we'll grow to love it here." They passed a tavern blaring with noise and she cringed, reliving her last memories of New York. They had not walked more than a few steps further when Richard stopped. She looked up at him questioningly. He dipped his hand into his pocket and fished out a key. "Welcome to your future home," he said and inserted the key into a keyhole. Mattie's jaw dropped. She looked at the tavern entrance, only a few steps from where she stood and then back at Richard. "You live here?" she croaked. "Yes, isn't it convenient? Right on Main Street and real close to my business." Chapter 3. Mattie followed Richard through the door, her mind numb. A tavern? How could he live next to a tavern and be all right with it? Mattie's insides trembled. She did not want Catherine growing up next to a tavern. All sorts of people frequented such establishments. "Welcome." Richard beamed. Mattie stood in the center of what was clearly a front room, with comfortable-looking chairs arranged around a fireplace. Her mind refused to take in the details of the room. "Come this way. I know ladies usually have their heads in the kitchen." "I have a surprise for you too, Missy," Richard boomed. The kitchen was a good size with a table centrally placed and a good work top near the cook stove. Richard pushed open the back door and beckoned Catherine to follow him. A gust of wind rushed in as Mattie followed them out. To Mattie's surprise, a garden plot filled the backyard, brimming with pole beans, carrots, and cabbages. Between each row of plants was a footpath. It looked so neat and pleasing, in contrast to the front of the house, that Mattie's spirits lifted. She stepped outside with them. Relieved, she saw that Richard had put up wooden planks as a sort of short fencing to separate his backyard from the tavern and the store on the other side. "Now come along. I want you to meet some people," Richard said. "Who?" Catherine asked, following at his heels. He opened a chicken coop, and Catherine peered in. "That there, the dark brown one, is the leader," Richard said to Catherine, his voice soft. "Do you want to give him a name?" "Yes," she shrieked with childish excitement. "Can we call him Moses? Like the Moses from the Bible?" "Moses, it is," Richard said. Mattie brushed away her tears. Her heart swelled with pleasure at Catherine's sweet laughter. She took several more steps to get a view of the end of the garden. A swishing noise reached her ears. She saw it then. The wide, full stream, with moss-covered boulders dotting the stream's path. As though pulled by the water, Mattie moved until she stood at the very edge of the yard. The water was clear, and she could see the smoothness of the rocks underneath. She let out a soft sigh of relief. With the fencing, Catherine would be safe. "Where in tarnation is everyone?" a voice called from the doorway. Mattie jumped at the scratchy voice coming from the kitchen. Richard heard it, too, for he took Catherine's hand and led her back to the house. "That would be Flo," he told Mattie without further explanation. Stepping into the kitchen, Mattie came to an abrupt halt at the sight of the woman who stood there, bearing a covered dish. Her cheeks were heavily rouged, and her mouth looked as though it had been dipped in blood. Mattie lowered her eyes unwittingly to the woman's generously exposed cleavage. "This here is Flo," Richard said, seemingly not bothered by the woman's attire. He took the dish from her and placed it on the table and then proceeded to arrange 3 plates on the table. "She has worked for me right from the beginning." Mattie's head spun. She quickly put 2 and 2 together. The tavern. Richard owned the tavern. Her legs turned to jelly. What had she done? "Are you all right, dear? Come and sit yourself down." Flo placed an arm around Mattie. Mattie cringed and fought the urge to fling off the arm. Stiffly, she lowered herself to the wooden chair. "Oh, dear Lord, help me." Mattie wanted to cover her eyes and disappear. Instead, she kept her gaze focused on the wall. "I'll be next door if you need me," Flo said. "I know we're going to be good friends." Mattie shut her eyes and swallowed. "Please, help yourself to the victuals," Richard said. "I know I'm hungry, and I imagine you are, too." "Did she cook this?" Mattie asked. Richard let out a bellow of laughter. "Flo, cook." He wiped off a stray tear from the corner of his eye. "Flo has been a godsend, but she can't cook to save anyone's life. Our cook is Matthew. Don't worry. In good time, you'll come to know all of them and regard them as family like I do." It was all Mattie could do not to grab her child and walk out. She put some food on Catherine's plate and then on her own. She ate mechanically, barely tasting the chicken stew or potatoes. "Ma, Mr. Richard said I could have the black chicken," Catherine said. Mattie nodded. She could not look up. "You'll have to find a name to make him truly yours," Richard said. "Can I feed him?" Catherine said. "Sure, honey, take some of that bread for him," Richard said. Awkward silence followed Catherine's exit. "Did something about Flo bother you?" Richard asked. His voice held a cold edge. Mattie lifted her head. The judgment in Richard's eyes startled her. "Yes. I mean, no," she stammered and then scrambled to her feet. "I'll wash up." Her hands trembled as she carried their plates to the wooden sink and dumped them inside. Confusion flooded her veins. How could she have been so stupid? Traveling to the other side of the country for a man she did not know? How could God have allowed her to make such a mistake? She couldn't possibly marry a tavern owner. Mattie's tears blinded her as the sound of plates clanking against each other filled the room. Which religious man ran a tavern and employed the likes of Flo to work for him? Mattie felt as though she had fallen into an abyss of sin. "Mattie?" Richard stood. She stiffened when he came to stand by her side. Sometimes people don't choose where they work or how they earn a living. Flo, like all the people who work for me, is a hard worker and only out to put bread on her table. How she chooses to go about that is no one's business but her own. He did not wait for Mattie's reply. The sound of the front door softly shutting told her he had left. Her cheeks burned as shame filled her, and she hung her head. Chapter 4. The lunchtime crowd had thinned as Richard helped Flo wipe down the tables. "Your missus seems nice," Flo said conversationally. Richard straightened his body and smiled. "I hope so. And her little girl is just lovable," Flo said. But something continued to bother him. Mattie's reaction when she first saw Flo. He frowned. Mattie had seemed so nice and quick to laugh, and he found it difficult to believe she could judge Flo, who was the kindest-hearted human being he had ever met. "Shame you had to get a bride all the way from the east when I'm right under your nose," Flo teased. Richard laughed. "You're too young for me," he teased back. Flo was at least 10 years older than he was, though looking at her, one could be forgiven for thinking her 10 years younger. Flo grew solemn. "Do right by them, Richard," she said, dabbing a finger at his chest. He nodded. "I intend to." He excused himself and left, satisfied that everything was in order. He opened the front door of his place softly, suspecting Mattie and Catherine were asleep. He tiptoed in. Catherine was stretched out on the long davenport, her mother slumped at the end, her face covered by her wavy hair. Gently, he pushed aside the strands covering her face and stood there soaking in her beauty. She had a heart-shaped face, framed by the most glorious untamed mass of black hair. His heart skipped a beat as he took in her full mouth and soft skin. She chose that moment to wake up. At first, she appeared startled as she looked up at him, and then her muscles relaxed, and she smiled at him in a way that melted his insides. He stepped back and sank into a chair. She stretched as a cat did, in no apparent hurry and unconscious of her fine figure that no dress could hide. "That felt good," she said, favoring him with another smile. "I'm sorry. I forgot to show you a guest room where you and Catherine could have napped," Richard said, speaking quietly. "That's all right," Mattie said, waving a slim hand. "We were comfortable right here." Anxiety gripped his heart. He had told Flo with brimming confidence that he would do right by Mattie and Catherine. But what if she didn't want to marry him? What if she had changed her mind because of his business? "You seem very thoughtful," she said in a sweet voice that pierced his heart. He laughed at himself. He was being foolish. If she had changed her mind, she wouldn't be as friendly as she was. "The wind's gone down," Richard said. "Do you fancy a walk around town when Catherine wakes up?" "I'd like that very much." It occurred to Richard that he probably smelled of smoke and food. He excused himself to wash up. When he returned, dressed in a clean white shirt, he was pleased to see the look of appreciation on Mattie's face. "Good morning, young lady," he said to Catherine. She giggled. "It's not morning, Mr. Richard." "You're right. It's evening, and I want to take you and your ma for a walk." Clusters of birds flew home as the weak sun disappeared behind the horizon, casting fiery red dye through the skies. Richard chuckled. He had never paid much attention to the color of the skies before. He held out his elbow. Mattie promptly tucked her hand in. "Do you think you'll like it here?" he asked as they turned down Main Street. His breath sat suspended as he waited for her answer. "I already like it. I'm partial to small towns. This reminds me of Jackson Town. It's where my late husband and I lived before he passed on," Mattie said. "What happened to him?" Joseph asked. He kept his eye on Catherine, who was skipping a few steps ahead of them. Plum River was relatively safe, but best to be cautious, he always said. Joseph was breaking out a stallion he had purchased. It got a fright and ran wild, throwing him out of the saddle. His leg got caught in the stirrup, and the animal dragged him for miles. He couldn't be saved. She clearly was trying to speak in a matter-of-fact voice, but tinges of sadness betrayed her. He squeezed her hand. "I'm very sorry you and Catherine had to go through that," he said. It was the Lord's will, she answered simply. The silence that fell between them was comfortable. They walked on, and then she asked him a question. What have you? Have you ever married? No, I haven't. It has never been the right time, he confessed. Now I understand why. I was waiting for you and Catherine. When I saw you at the depot, I knew then that you were right for me. Mattie was silent, and Richard felt a stab of disappointment. He had expected some form of encouragement to his heartfelt declaration. Is that the church? She asked, pointing to the wooden building that stood on a hill. Yes, it was one of the first structures to come up in Plum River, Richard said. He proceeded to tell her other historical information about the town. Every so often, he searched Mattie's face for traces of her thoughts about him. Mrs. Anderson, a thin stick of a woman with a permanent frown, stepped out of the church as they passed, shutting the wooden door with a loud bang when she caught sight of him. God have mercy, the woman mumbled as she shuffled by, only pausing to throw him a dirty glance. He felt Mattie stiffen beside him. He wanted to assure her that Mrs. Anderson was not worth getting upset over, she was the town's busybody. Before he could say anything, Mattie spoke. I'd like to turn back now, she said, her voice icy. Chapter 5. The house has never been as clean as it is today. Mattie whirled around, a huge smile on her face. She sucked in a breath at the sight of Richard, who was gazing at her as though she were a surprise gift. I enjoy cleaning, she admitted, her gaze faltering only slightly under his intense stare. Where's Catherine? He asked, his brow creased with concern. Come and see. Mattie beckoned him to the sink where she stood. He followed her gaze, and his face crinkled into a smile. She's made a friend. Catherine was running around the yard with Rachel, the girl from next door at the general store. She was 6 years old, the same as Catherine, with a plump body and eyes that twinkled with mischief. Mattie just prayed that her mischief wouldn't get Catherine into trouble. She has, Mattie said, chuckling. I got quite a fright when I heard another voice, only to find a sweet girl Catherine's age. Her name's Rachel, I believe. The Browns' youngest. Yes, she's from next door. She told me her folks own the general store. Mattie's eyes sparkled at the memory of trying to figure out how Rachel had come to be in the backyard. She squeezed herself through a tiny hole barely big enough for a cat. Richard threw his head back and laughed. I'm glad Catherine has someone to play with. I've prepared lunch for us, Mattie said. I thought I smelled something delicious. He inhaled appreciatively. Mattie laughed. She took the pot of steamed vegetables, fried chicken, and potatoes from the oven to the work counter. The plates were already on the table. One of our chickens? It gratified Mattie that he referred to the chicken as theirs. Yes, Mattie said. Catherine was not too pleased, but I did choose the one she hadn't named. It was all right of me, wasn't it? To cook it? She knew she'd taken a risk, slaughtering one of his chickens, but she hadn't wanted to go into the tavern to ask him. It was all right, he assured her. Mattie spooned their lunch onto plates, heaping a healthy portion for Richard. He was clearly a man who enjoyed his food, and she was glad she had always loved to cook, picking up new recipes whenever she could. Rachel went on home, but she said I could go to her house later. Can I, Mama? Please? Catherine came in saying. Yes, why not? Now wash up for lunch. Richard made appreciative noises as he wolfed down his lunch. He ate with relish, gobbling greedily every spoonful. I enjoyed that, thank you. Nothing like a home-cooked meal, he said, speaking for the first time since he began eating. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Mattie said, flushing with pleasure. She had forgotten the joy of cooking for a man. I can't stay long, Richard said, Saturdays are busy at the saloon. However, I will make it up to you ladies. He winked at Catherine, who dissolved into giggles. How about I pick you up at the boarding house tomorrow morning and take you somewhere special? Where to, Mr. Richard? Catherine asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. You'll have to be patient, Missy, he said, clearly enjoying her reaction. Mattie frowned. The following day was Sunday. Could we go before the church service begins? Richard shrugged. That'll do. I'll drop you and Catherine outside the church at 11. But aren't you coming in with us? Catherine asked. Mattie glanced between Richard and her daughter. Catherine, go on to Rachel's. I'll come in a while and meet Mrs. Brown. Mattie's stomach churned. Why won't you come with us? She asked, after Catherine left. I see no real reason for religion if I'm to be honest, Richard said, his voice casual. I treat folks right, and that's what counts as far as I can see. Mattie could feel a vein throbbing in her neck. Don't you believe in our Lord? She managed to ask. Richard pushed his chair back. I would like to continue this conversation another time, but I must get back to work. There's bound to be a crowd. She nodded stiffly. When Richard left, she covered her face with her hands. It was one thing to be betrothed to a tavern owner, but quite another to be engaged to a man who did not even attend church services. Mattie developed an instant headache, and she had to lie down on the davenport. She lost all concept of time as her thoughts of marrying Richard and how people would view her slogged through her mind. A knock sounded on the door before it creaked open. She raised herself to a sitting position. How are you doing, honey? Richard sent me to check on you as you didn't look too good earlier, Flo said, running a hand through her mussed hair and patting it back into place. Mattie tried to smile, but she knew it was a pathetic attempt. Please tell Richard I'm all right, she said and pushed herself to her feet. I'm on my way to fetch Catherine. And then, I have some letters to write back at the boarding house. Oh, that sounds nice, Flo said. I'll walk you down, and we can have a bit of a gossip on the way. It's a treat to have another woman to chat with. Mattie desperately searched her thoughts for an excuse to get Flo to change her mind. But the woman pushed open the front door, and Mattie had no choice but to follow her. Your little girl is such an angel, Flo said. Is she enjoying herself here? She continued talking without waiting for an answer. I bet it's difficult for you, honey, leaving all your family behind? Her unexpected kind words brought tears to Mattie's eyes. Something stuck in her throat. She nodded and wiped at her eyes. Yes, I do miss my parents, Mattie found herself saying. That's to be expected. But after a month's time with that dashing Richard by your side, you'll not remember how lonely you were, Flo predicted. I'll be fine. Thank you. And he is nice looking, Mattie finally said, and they both burst into laughter. Mattie stopped walking in front of the general store. I have to fetch Catherine here. Flo glanced at the store and made a face. I'm afraid I'll go no further with you. I spoil that woman's day whenever she sees me. Flo let out a giggle. Go on, I'll see you tomorrow. Mattie watched her as she left. She shook her head and, in spite of herself, grinned at the exaggerated way Flo moved her hips as she walked. If one took the time to dig beyond the rouge and the clothes that revealed too much skin, Flo had a kindly heart. Chapter 6. Is it time yet, Ma? Catherine asked for the 5th time that morning, her nose pressed against the window. Mattie glanced up from the letter she was penning to her parents. To her relief, the slight drizzle had let up and a feeble sun was breaking through the clouds. Mr. Richard should be coming just about now, Mattie said. She folded the unfinished letter and placed it in the drawer of the small writing table. Ma. I see him. Mr. Richard is coming. He's driving a buggy, Catherine screamed. Mattie hurried to the window and looked down. She smiled at the sight of Richard atop an open buggy pulled by 2 horses. Her heart pounded as she watched him park the contraption, jump down, and hitch the horses to a post. Before entering the boarding house, he straightened his jacket and brushed down his trousers with his hands. Let's go down, Mattie said, only to find Catherine by the door bouncing on her toes. Richard stood near the entrance as they came down the stairs. Their eyes met and an intense attraction gripped her, stealing her breath. You 2 ladies look beautiful, Richard said, promptly taking Catherine's hand. Glad that she had worn her best Sunday attire, Mattie followed them outside and allowed Richard to help her into the buggy. She felt his warmth through her gloves, and the next thing she knew, the feeling had swamped her whole body. "Where are we going, Mr. Richard?" Catherine asked, seated snugly between them. "I shall only tell you when we get near," Richard said, pulling the reins. "I was worried the drizzle wouldn't stop," he said, glancing briefly at Mattie. "Me, too," she admitted. "But I did get a chance to write a letter to my parents. One day, we shall have them come and visit us. They would love it here," Richard said. Mattie gripped the sides of the buggy. Everything in her life was moving too fast. She couldn't imagine her parents in Plum River. What would they think of Richard owning a tavern? It was something she would have to keep to herself if she decided to marry him. She pushed away the disturbing thought. She had awakened that morning with her mind on Richard and the day ahead, and that's where she wanted her thoughts to stay. "Plum River is at its best during Christmas," Richard said. "The decorations and the trees are a sight to behold. The folks go all out to prepare. It brings something special to the holiday." "Will I get a Christmas gift?" Catherine interrupted. "I can about guarantee it, Missy," Richard assured her. Richard glanced at Mattie, but she refused to meet his eyes. She knew what he was thinking. He was wondering whether they'd still be there at Christmas, whether the two of them would indeed be wed. She hadn't yet decided what to do. Sometimes, like that morning, her soul felt perfectly at ease, but on the previous day, she'd felt tormented by Richard's work at the tavern. "Look, Catherine, a butterfly," Richard said, pointing ahead. "You don't usually see one this time of year." They were driving over a well-worn but narrow path through thick, evergreen trees. "I see another one," Catherine cried, her voice filled with awe. "Can I touch it?" Richard laughed. "You might when we get to where we are going. If there are any more around, that is." Mattie leaned back in the seat and made a conscious decision to enjoy the day. Richard turned the buggy away from the road and stopped a few feet ahead. "We're here," he said. A strong scent of moss and lichen wafted to Mattie's nostrils. As soon as Richard finished unhitching the horses from the buggy, he led them on a path through the trees and undergrowth. They stopped in a clearing, and when Mattie looked up, she gasped. Torrents of water cascaded down the hillside before smashing with a deafening noise, plunging into a misty pool at the bottom. "It's beautiful," Mattie shouted above the noise, her voice filled with awe. "I thought you'd like it," Richard said. "Come, let's walk to a quieter spot." The patch of grass grew thick next to a bend where the river flowed. Sure enough, there were a few butterflies flapping their delicate wings as they fluttered up and down. Catherine gave chase, screaming in delight every time she managed to get near one. "Folks like picnicking here during spring and summer. Not so much this time of year. But it's a known spot for couples who are courting," Richard said, his gaze on her. Mattie's heart skipped a beat. "I see why they would choose this spot. It's lovely." Without warning, he took her hand and wrapped it in both of his. "Mattie, I brought you here purposely. I'd like to marry you and make you and Catherine my family. My life has taken on new hope since I met you, and nothing would make me happier than saying my vows with you." Mattie broke his stare and looked away. Her whole being shouted out for her to say yes, but something held her back. "Is it the tavern?" Richard asked, his voice deflated. "Or is it me?" Mattie closed her eyes momentarily. Her mouth refused to form the words to confirm his suspicions. "We'll be late for the service," she finally said, opening her eyes. The light in his deep brown eyes faded, and a hardness came into them. Mattie's chest constricted. "Fine," he said. "Let's go." His shoulders were tense as he led the way back to the buggy. Mattie's throat thickened at the change in him. If only it was as easy as he thought it was. On the way back, Mattie was glad for Catherine's chatter. Richard did not say a word, but every so often, he nodded at Catherine encouragingly. Outside the church, a few people were gathered, and they all turned to stare as Mattie and Catherine alighted from Richard's buggy. Mattie's face grew hot. What did they think about her with Richard? The church bell gave 3 low rings, and the group filed inside. Will you be all right returning home? Richard asked her, keeping his eyes trained straight ahead. Yes, we'll walk, Mattie said, eager to get into the church. It's not far. Fine, he said and pulled the reins. See you later, little missy. Catherine beamed and waved. Bye, Mr. Richard. Why did Mattie feel like crying? During church, she barely paid attention to the sermon. Her head was filled with the image of Richard's eyes after he had opened his heart to her. They had been filled with hope. But, later, the congregation filed out after they sang the last hymn. Mattie clutched Catherine's hand and hurried outside. Excuse me. With dread, Mattie stopped and turned to the voice. A matronly-looking woman stood smiling at her. You must be new in town, she said. I noticed your little girl, as I'm the schoolmistress. My name's Miss Gilbert. Mattie smiled. It's a pleasure to meet you. Mine's Mattie Simpson and this is Catherine. Will she be joining us at school? Yes, and maybe, Mattie stammered, suddenly aware of the eyes on her. We shall be more than happy to have her. There's a women's meeting after the service. We like to begin planning for our Christmas festivities quite early. Please join us. New ideas are always welcome. It seemed as though everyone milling about the front of the church was now staring at her. Perhaps another time, Mattie said. Please, excuse us. She only noticed the drops of rain when they were well away from the church. With every second that passed, the rain grew heavier. Mattie increased her pace. Ma? Catherine said. What? Am I going too fast for you? No, Ma. I was just wondering when we're going to see Mr. Richard again. And I can run faster than you, she said, shaking Mattie's hand off and breaking into a run. With a shake of her head, Mattie ran after her. Outside Richard's door, they both stopped to shake off the water from their coats. Catherine looked up at her, her brown eyes solemn. Will you marry Mr. Richard? I like him. Mattie smiled. That's still a bit up in the air. But I would like to, she said, and then wanted to clap her hand over her mouth. What had possessed her to say that? She didn't know whether she was going to marry Richard or not. She was ready to take back her words, but Catherine had already run on ahead, giggling all the way. Chapter 7. It was nearly time for their midday meal. Mattie opened the back door. Richard's garden was a river of mud, and the thought of slogging through the mire and the rain to get vegetables was not appealing. She cocked her ear at the sound of breaking twigs and branches. The stream behind the house had swelled with the downpour and was now flowing rapidly, carrying with it branches and twigs. It made a hissing noise as it rushed by. Mattie trembled. Look at the stream, Ma, Catherine said, standing by her side. Mattie's hand went to her shoulders. Listen to me, Catherine. I don't ever want you to go near that water, especially when it's raging like that. You must always stay within Mr. Richard's fence. Only go as far as the chicken coop, and that's it. The water can carry a grown person away, let alone a child like you. Do you understand? Catherine's eyes went wide. Yes, Mama. Your ma's right, Richard's voice said from the kitchen. That stream is now dangerous. I didn't hear you come home, Mattie said with a nervous laugh. With that pounding water, you can't hear a thing. His countenance had changed from earlier, and he seemed back to his normal cheerful self. I was thinking of going into the garden for some carrots to make a stew, Mattie explained. No need for that, Richard said. Take a rest as today is Sunday. You've been working hard all week. Mattie flushed with pleasure at his compliment. We can have our lunch at the tavern. Matthew makes a delicious Sunday special of beef, potatoes, and vegetables. Mattie stiffened. A saloon is not the right place for a child, she said, her voice unyielding. I wouldn't suggest it if I thought it wasn't right for Catherine, Richard replied, his voice equally cold. She turned to face him. I am not taking Catherine into that place. A vein pulsed on Richard's forehead. Sundays are quiet, and mostly it's full of folk who are coming in to eat. Mattie shook her head. No matter what he said, a saloon was a place of sin. What would people say if they saw her and Catherine entering such an establishment? I run a clean tavern, Mattie, Richard said. You've never once stepped inside, and yet you're quick to judge. Time stood still as they stood facing each other, neither willing to yield. Suit yourself then. Richard shrugged, turning to walk away. I'll have Flo bring in something for you to eat. Won't you join us? Mattie asked. He paused but did not turn around. No. Mattie sank into a kitchen chair. Is Mr. Richard mad at you? Catherine asked. No, sweetheart, Mattie said, inwardly chastising herself for the lie. Why don't you get your doll from the front room and play with it? Mattie felt sick. Her common sense drew her to one side, and her heart pulled her to the other. The pounding of the rain on the roof eased, but her turmoil did not. Richard was a good, caring man. It would be difficult to reject him. Just as she pushed herself to go and check on Catherine, a beating sounded on the front door. She hurried to find Catherine had opened the door, and Flo was fawning over her. Mattie tightened her expression when she saw Flo's attire. Aren't you cold? She asked. Flo beamed back. We working girls can't afford to be cold. Besides, this gets me extra tips, she said, gesturing to her cleavage with her chin. Mattie hid her shock behind a forced smile. She had never met someone as blunt as Flo. She wondered what her mother, a stout Christian, would make of her. Thank you, Mattie said as she took the covered dish from her hands. You're welcome, Flo said. Matthew, he's the cook, remember, sends his welcome and wants to meet you. Do you like working in the saloon? Mattie blurted. Flo's eyes widened. Mattie's breath suspended. Perhaps she had crossed the boundaries of politeness. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked, she said quickly. Why shouldn't you ask? Flo said. Lots of folk think to themselves but don't have the stomach to ask. I do enjoy it. Any man who can't conduct himself in a gentlemanly manner is escorted out. Richard's made it nice for all of us. But men get drunk there, don't they? Mattie asked. Flo laughed. Of course, honey. At times. Why do you think they part with their money? Nothing wrong with a drink after a hard day's work. Mattie pressed her lips together and kept her own counsel. The most important thing to know is to carry your drink, she said. The odd thing is that Richard himself don't drink. Never has. She shook her head. He's an odd one for a tavern owner. Matthew now. Once in a while, he'll throw one back. I'll meet him one of these days, Mattie said. Won't you come in for a bit? She surprised herself by asking. In truth, Mattie longed for someone to speak to. She missed New York mostly because of her mother's company. Not today, honey. I have to work the tavern alone. Richard is writing up his records in his office. On Sunday? Mattie smiled bravely, feeling lonelier than ever. Another time, then? You could come to the tavern with me. I'm sure Richard wouldn't mind. Mattie shook her head. Flo gave her a puzzled look, waved at Catherine, and left. The woman confused Mattie. She seemed so kind, but how had she come to work in a saloon? As Richard had predicted, the beef was delicious and the vegetables more so. I must get the cook to teach me how to make peas like this, Mattie said. Can I go to Rachel's to play? Catherine asked, wiping her mouth with a checkered napkin. Mattie sighed. Everyone except for her had something to do. She would have loved to help Flo, if the tavern had been a restaurant. You may. I think the rain has stopped. I'll take you there now, Mattie said, thinking to herself that she would pop her head into the saloon and take a quick peek. She walked Catherine to the Rachel's home, exchanged greetings with Mrs. Brown, and left. She passed Richard's house and stood at the swinging doors of the saloon. A bead of sweat formed on her brow. At the last minute, she turned and walked away. Chapter 8. Mattie kept her head lowered as she hurried toward the church. She was a coward. She should have entered the saloon and confirmed for herself the type of people that frequented such establishments. Her thoughts felt muddled as she trudged through the mud. She'd never in her life been so wishy-washy over a decision. Either something was right, or it wasn't. Should she book passage on the next train back to New York? But the thought of never seeing Richard again seemed unbearable. He had wormed his way into her heart with his kind ways and his acceptance of Catherine. Why, he treated her daughter like she was his own. With Richard, she would never have to worry about Catherine being cared for. Trouble was, if Mattie married Richard, she would probably become unwanted in Plum River. Who would associate with the saloon keeper's wife? Flo would probably be her only friend. Back in Jackson, Mattie had enjoyed her involvement with the church and all its programs. What would it do to her and Catherine to be ostracized from society? Was it worth it to sacrifice her standing and that of her child for Richard? Her mind roiled with questions, but no answers came to her. Perhaps if she spent some time in the church praying, the answers would come. She saw Mrs. Anderson when she was a foot away from her. The thin woman was standing on the church porch. Is that all she ever did? Mattie smiled falteringly. The older woman wore a pinched expression as she looked Mattie up and down. Good day to you, Mrs. Anderson, Mattie said. It will be a good day indeed when there's no more drinks sold in Plum River, the woman barked, her eyes glistening with passion. It defeats my thinking why a sensible-looking woman such as yourself could agree to be betrothed to that wicked man who owns the tavern. Flecks of saliva spotted the sides of her mouth as she spoke. Shame on you, she added, stepping closer to jab a finger in Mattie's chest. Mattie gasped and fled into the church. Her heartbeat was racing as she lowered herself onto one of the front pews. She clenched her hands into fists and prayed that Mrs. Anderson would not follow her inside. Oh, dear Lord, what was she to do? Richard was a good man. Why, oh why, did he have to be a tavern owner? Outside, the rain resumed its pounding. It was easily heard on the roof of the church. Mattie hoped Catherine and Rachel had the sense to play inside. She felt rather than saw the presence of someone else in the church. Mattie's eyes snapped open. Standing at the altar was Preacher Roberts, his wise gray eyes on her. Her stomach churned. Is this a private moment, or may I join you? He asked, his low voice resonating through the church. Mattie was tempted to say that it was a private moment, then she thought better of it. At that point, she had nothing to lose, as everyone in the church already seemed to know she was in Plum River as the saloon owner's betrothed. Mattie scooted to make space on the bench. The preacher's handshake was firm and warm. I saw you this morning, but we did not get a chance to meet, he said. You left very quickly. Yes, Mattie said. I had a previous engagement. His shrewd eyes were on her, and he said, May I be of help? Part of my work involves lightening the loads of my flock if I can. Mattie slumped on the bench, overwhelmed by the decisions she had to make. May I also add that whatever my parishioners tell me is kept in confidence? The temptation to unburden herself grew. Mattie looked into his gray eyes and lowered her head. She then proceeded to tell him everything from the beginning. How she lost Joseph and her desperate need for a family and a home of her own. He did not interrupt her or appear shocked as she spoke. Every so often, she searched his face and found the same pleasant, interested expression. When she finished, she waited for his response. Did you pray before making the decision to come to Plum River to be betrothed to Richard? I did, Mattie said. Are you a person of faith, Mrs. Simpson? Mattie's eyes widened. Of course, I am. The scriptures say that you should trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding, the preacher went on in his gentle, pleasing voice. But, you don't understand, Mattie said, growing agitated. Just this moment before I entered the church, a parishioner berated me for my relationship with Mr. Richard. Have you considered that perhaps you're where our good Lord intended you to be? You say you're a woman of faith. Why then do you question our Lord when he has already cleared your path? But what about the hateful comments from people? Mattie asked, her voice small. I happen to know Richard Dixon, and you'll find no finer man than he, the preacher said. He contributed a great deal to the building of this church and many other things. Mattie's eyes widened. Richard had done that? I see you're surprised, preacher said with a chuckle. Sometimes, we are very quick to judge people, yet the scriptures warn us against doing so. Richard may not attend our services, but I know of no better man. Mattie's mouth went dry. Mrs. Simpson, never make it your work to please people. Look to the Lord for approval. He slid off the bench to stand. Now, I did not tell you to marry Richard, but do not judge him based on what people say of him. I wish you God's blessings as you make your decision. She looked up into his kind eyes. Thank you, preacher, she murmured. A peaceful feeling descended upon her as the preacher padded back into his office at the right side of the altar. Mattie felt almost foolish as it dawned on her that she could have lost Richard because of worrying over other people's opinions. Her whole body felt lit from a fire within. She loved Richard. She admitted it. She loved his smile, his loud laughter, his gentleness, and the way he treated her daughter. Mattie wanted to shout it out from the roof of the church. She leapt up from the pew and bounded outside. The rain had stopped again. She decided that she would march into the tavern right up to Richard and declare her love for him. She increased her speed, not able to contain the wide smile on her face. Chapter 9. You look downcast, Flo commented above the gentle buzz of conversation in the tavern. Richard gave her a wry grin. It's not the best day. The train for the east leaves in a few days, and I reckon Mattie and Catherine will be on it. Things not going so well then? Flo asked. Richard placed the mug he was wiping down on the counter. We get along mighty fine. The trouble is this place. It don't bode well with her. She believes a Christian person shouldn't get married to a tavern owner. I think the townsfolk's attitude bothers her as well. Flo's nostrils flared. I like Miss Mattie well enough, but the truth is I can't abide by holier-than-thou people. I'm surprised. I never figured her for one of those. He hadn't either when he'd met her. If she can't see what a fine gentleman you are, then it's her loss. She can go back to the east and good riddance. Richard went still. But she can leave that sweet child of hers behind, Flo added. Catherine has sneaked her way into my heart, too, he said, and then thought to himself, and so has her mother. He thought he heard a child's voice from outside. Did you just hear someone call my name? Was that Catherine? He asked Flo. Catherine's voice came again, this time closer. Richard sprinted to the door and pushed it open. Mr. Richard, please help. What is it? Catherine grabbed his hand and yanked him toward his house. He ran beside her. Rachel fell in the stream, Catherine cried. I told her that Ma said we weren't to play there. Richard cursed under his breath. He ran to the house and around to the back. The stream was now rushing downstream. He thought frantically. Rachel would have been in his backyard. He stamped over the garden, anxiously peering down the river. He saw the child then, further downstream, clutching onto a broken branch. Her head bopped up and down with the gushing water. The branch she clung to appeared stuck where the main stream ended. After that, the water led to a waterfall of sharp rocks. Go and tell Flo. Without a second thought, Richard hurdled the short fence, kicked off his boots, and plunged into the icy cold water. Hold on, Rachel. I'm coming, he hollered, knowing she'd likely not hear him over the howling of the water. His right foot caught on something, and he tumbled into the water. Fighting the current to get to his feet again, Richard strained to see the girl. He grabbed onto a protruding rock and balanced himself as he fought his way deeper into the freezing water. Rachel's head was still visible. As he neared her, he heard her whimper. Richard fought against the current, using all his strength to get to the child, and in a minute that felt like hours, he was beside her. I've got you, honey. I got you, Richard said, grabbing her small, trembling body to his. He struggled back to the edge of the stream. Hero, someone cried from above the bank. Oh, Rachel, came the voice of Mrs. Brown. Richard allowed himself to collapse on the bank with the girl still in his arms. He could hear the crowd chanting above him, but he paid no mind. His focus was totally on the child. "Are you all right?" he asked Rachel. "Just breathe, honey. Just breathe." The girl blubbered and began to sob. "Mr. Richard." Richard looked up at Mrs. Brown. She was muddy, and her dress was torn from scrambling over the fence. She knelt beside them. Tears streamed down her face. She snatched up Rachel and rocked her back and forth. "You saved my girl. My dear child. Thank you," she cried. "I don't know what I would have done if Rachel had drowned." Richard shook his head. "Anyone would have done it." The townsfolk came forward, pushing over the fence. They approached him one at a time. "You are a good man," the man who owned the apothecary said. "Good on you," the man from the livery added, clapping Richard hard on his shoulder. Richard's body shook from the cold. "Richard." Mattie's voice cut through the crowd, as she rushed to him. "Are you all right?" "I heard what happened." "I'm fine, Mattie. I need to change out of these wet clothes." "Where's Catherine?" he asked as he struggled to his feet, weighted down by his wet clothes. "I'm here, Mr. Richard," Catherine said from behind her mother's skirts. Mattie took his arm firmly and guided him through the crowd. As they walked, he received more praise from people. He nodded in response. "Run ahead, Catherine, and get some warm blankets from Mr. Richard's room," Mattie instructed, and Catherine broke into a run. "What were those girls thinking, playing near the stream?" Mattie asked. She was shaking, too, just thinking of all that could have happened. "I warned Catherine." "It wasn't her fault," Richard said, his teeth chattering. "She told Rachel, but the girl wouldn't listen." "I hope her mother gives her a thorough talking to," Mattie said. "Her naughtiness might have cost 2 lives." Tears welled into her eyes. Richard put his arm around her, and they went into the house. He squeezed her shoulders before releasing her. "We're all fine now, Mattie. I'm sure Rachel's learned her lesson. I'm just thankful she's going to be all right." Inside the front room, Catherine waited with 2 blankets. Mattie quickly undid the buttons of Richard's shirt and slipped it off him. She wrapped the first blanket around him. "Please, wait in the kitchen, Catherine," she said. Without a fuss, Mattie undid the buttons of Richard's trousers and pulled them down. His socks soon followed. She wrapped the second blanket over the first and gently led him to a kitchen chair. "It'll be warmer in here," she explained. Mattie put the tea kettle on, and then both she and Catherine sat watching him like hawks. He grinned. "I feel better already. That water was colder than a well digger's behind," he said. Mattie and Catherine erupted into giggles. Richard joined them and soon, their laughter echoed in the kitchen. "Now, I know you're fine," Mattie said, wiping tears from the corners of her eyes. She poured him a steaming cup of tea. "Catherine." "Mama," Catherine interrupted with feeling. "It wasn't me. I told Rachel we weren't allowed to go near the stream. She said you wouldn't find out." "Then I suppose you don't need me to tell you again," Mattie said. "No, Mama. I'll never go near the stream, not even when it's not raining." "Good. Now, I want to have a word with Mr. Richard alone." Richard's face hardened. Mattie saw his expression, and her spirits dropped. Did he not want her anymore? Chapter 10. Richard let Mattie take his hand. She stared into his eyes. They shone with an emotion he soon identified. Like the rest of the folks in Plum River who had turned their heads away from him previously, she now viewed him as a hero. "You saved Rachel with no thought of your own safety." "I did what anyone would have done on seeing a little girl about to drown," Richard said, his voice tight. He saw her swallow and then she patted his hand. "I'll fix you a bath, it'll warm you up." "Thank you." He watched her fuss with the water. What did she want to talk to him about? Had she changed her mind? Surely, she had more to say than that she was going to fix him a bath. As soon as the water was ready, Richard went out into the washroom, away from Mattie's view. He quickly cleaned himself, taking time to remove matted leaves in his hair. Still, he couldn't stay in the washroom forever. Nor did he want to. He wanted to know what Mattie wanted to say. He knew she was hovering just outside the washroom door. He could hear her feet on the wooden floor and her gown rustling. "All right, Mattie, what is it?" he finally asked her when he rejoined her in the kitchen. "I need to tell you something," she said, her eyes serious. She appeared nervous. "What happened today made me realize how easily things could change. Richard, you could have drowned along with poor Rachel." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's over now, Mattie. Please don't cry." A painful tightness gripped his throat. His arms ached to hold her close and keep her safe from anything that would cause her to cry. She swallowed and cleared her throat. "You asked me to marry you, and I never gave you an answer. My answer is yes, Richard. I want nothing more than to be your wife." She sat with her hands on her lap gazing at him, her eyes now brimming with expectation. He tore his gaze away. "No, Mattie." The words cut through his heart. But he couldn't do it. He just couldn't. His nails dug into the palms of his hands. It hurt him to the core, saying no to a woman he loved. "What?" she whispered, her skin pale. Clearly, she was stunned. "Why not?" "My dear Mattie, I've made my feelings for you and Catherine plain. You, however, don't want to marry me." "But I do, Richard. Let me finish. The only reason you think you do is because I saved Rachel from the water. Your church people have now approved of me, for the moment anyway, and that has made you see me in a different light." Mattie bowed her head, which only confirmed Richard's suspicions. "I haven't changed, Mattie. I'm still Richard, the tavern owner." His voice caught and broke, but he continued. "What will happen when the townsfolk change their opinion of me again? Which they will. What will you do then?" She did not respond. "I'm no hero, Mattie. But I'm not an evil man, either. I run a good, clean tavern, and I work hard to put food on the table. You can't even bring yourself to take one step into my place." He stood. "Look. I'll give you the train fare to return to New York. I want to love a woman who does not judge me by the work I do." He could hear her sobs as he shut the door and walked away. He bit down on his lip and fought the urge to rush back and gather her in his arms. But he didn't. It was better this way. "Are you crying, Ma?" Mattie wiped her tears with the sleeve of her blouse. "No, sweetheart, something entered my eye. Can we go and see Rachel?" She looked really sick. "Yes, we shall. I'll just clean up, and we can go." In the washroom, Mattie splashed cold water on her face. Her chest ached as though she had suffered a physical injury. She was furious with herself. She had judged Richard just as he had said she did. She would lose a good person because of her own lack of mercy and wisdom. "Are you ready?" Catherine asked her. Yes. If only she could lie down and sleep a while. Maybe when she woke up, the last hour would be a bad dream. A bell tinkled as they entered the general store. Mr. Brown, his spectacles low on the bridge of his nose, stood alone at the counter. "Mrs. Simpson," he exclaimed when he saw her. "How is Mr. Richard?" "What a fine man he is. As soon as Rachel feels better, we must have the three of you for supper. It would be an honor to share a table with him." Nausea rose in Mattie's throat. What hypocrisy. Just a day earlier, he'd barely managed to say hello to her when she brought Catherine over to play. "We've come to see if Rachel is all right. She's upstairs with the doctor and her mother. She's running a fever, but Doc says she should be all right. Can we go up?" "Yes, of course," he said, waving his hands. The Browns' living quarters were up a narrow flight of stairs. There was no one in the parlor. Catherine went on ahead and dashed into one of the chambers. Mrs. Brown soon came out, her brow creased with lines of worry. Is she all right? Mattie asked, going to her side. It was the chill of the water, you see, Mrs. Brown said. The doctor said the next couple of days will determine how she'll recover. He fears she may contract pneumonia from the ordeal. We'll pray for her, Mattie said. Rachel has a strong body. Surely, that will help in fighting away illness. Yes, I suppose so, Mrs. Brown said. How is Mr. Richard? He's fine. He was truly amazing, Mrs. Brown said. Mr. Brown and I plan on having our supper at the tavern next Sunday. As she spoke, Mattie saw clearly how Richard had interpreted her own actions and words. Shame filled her. She couldn't blame him for turning her down. A hollow emptiness crept over her. Was there nothing she could say or do that would change his mind? She bit her lower lip to stop herself from crying. Soon, she would be on her way back to New York. She supposed her parents would allow her and Catherine to sleep in the parlor while they found a place of their own. Chapter 11. The walls were closing in on him as the Browns fawned over him. After checking in on Rachel, Richard wanted to flee, but the two of them wouldn't let him leave. He nursed a cup of tea and listened with one ear to Mr. Brown droning on about how Plum River needed more fine folk like him. The store bell rang downstairs. Please excuse me, Mr. Richard, Mr. Brown said. Yes, of course, and please do call me Richard. Yes, of course, the man said and finally left. Richard sat, waiting for Mrs. Brown to return from checking on Rachel so he could beg his leave. He was worried about the girl. The fever she developed had only abated slightly. Being in the cold water for such a young one could cause all sorts of problems. He heard someone coming up the stairs, and he braced himself for another round of praise. His heart skipped a beat when Mattie and Catherine appeared. Catherine ran to him and threw her small body against him. Richard's heart swelled. He teared up at the thought of never seeing her again. He could bear it if they were remaining in Plum River, but he knew they were leaving. Hadn't he been the one who'd insisted on it? Hadn't he been the one who'd purchased their passage back to New York? Catherine. How I've missed you, Richard said into her thick hair. I've missed you too, Pa. Richard froze. His gaze flew to Mattie. She stared at her daughter. I'll check on Rachel, she uttered and fled the room. Catherine settled herself on Richard's lap, her trusting eyes on him. I'm glad you're going to be my pa, she said. Your mother told you that? Richard asked. She giggled. Ma tells me everything. She told me after church, before Rachel fell into the water. Mr. Richard, can we go for a ride again in your buggy? Richard gazed at her sweet face and could not utter the words that would surely break her heart. Her mother would tell her soon that they were leaving. We'll see when. Now, why don't you go check on your friend while I return to work? Say goodbye to Mrs. Brown and your ma for me. Richard trudged down the stairs with a heavy heart. He was glad Mr. Brown was busy counting out change for a customer when he passed through the store. He hurried out before the man could detain him further. Richard felt restless all day, and he gladly shut and locked the door when the last customer left. He had not eaten anything that day. His stomach growled, but eating held no appeal. He kept imagining Mattie packing up their cases. She had not come to say goodbye, but after their last conversation, he didn't blame her. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. The night passed slowly as he dozed in fits. Something nagged at him, and he couldn't pin it down. He had thought it was Mattie leaving, but that wasn't it. It was something else. He gave up all pretense of sleeping and lay on his back staring into the darkness. His mind went over the day from the moment he had gone to check on Rachel till the moment he locked up. Catherine jumping on his lap and calling him Pa. Ma tells me everything. She told me after church before Rachel fell into the water. Richard bolted upright in bed, his heart pounding. If Mattie had told Catherine that she would marry him before the accident, it meant she had made the decision earlier. She hadn't been influenced by his saving little Rachel. Richard groaned. Unable to lie there any longer, he got up and paced a circle between the bed and the door. What a fool he was. He had been so sure he was right that he hadn't given Mattie a chance to speak. He pulled the curtains to the side and glanced outside. Still dark. After what seemed like years, dawn finally broke and he hurriedly got dressed. He had to see Mattie. The sun peeked through the blue clouds, promising Richard a new start. His body felt tight with anxiety. Would Mattie want him now? He had behaved like a fool. The streets were empty at that time of the morning. There were no signs of life outside the boarding house. He tried the door. Locked. He paced some more, and then, unable to bear it any longer, he stood back where he could see Mattie's and Catherine's window. "Mattie," he shouted, his voice echoing down the main street. "Mattie. Please." He kept calling, knowing he was waking everybody but not caring. The curtains in her room stirred, and then the window opened. Mattie and Catherine looked down at him, rubbing their eyes. "Richard?" "Mattie, will you marry me?" he shouted, afraid the wind would carry his voice away. She needed to hear everything he said. "I was wrong. Please forgive me. Don't go back on that train. I want you and Catherine here with me." "Mr. Richard, I mean Pa," Catherine shouted. He could see that she was jumping up and down. "Yes. Ma will marry you." Both Catherine and Mattie disappeared from the window. Richard's heart flew to his throat. Had Mattie pulled Catherine away from the window in disgust? She hadn't said a word. Maybe she couldn't marry someone who had behaved so foolishly. He searched the window one more time. The curtains were firmly drawn. He waited another beat and then turned and trudged away. "Richard." He whirled around in time to catch Mattie as she ran into his arms. "Oh, Richard. I'm sorry I—" "Hush, my love. It's me who should apologize." Her body felt warm and delicate in his arms. She took a step back and placed her hands on his cheeks. "I loved you when I first saw you, Richard," she said. "I thought owning a saloon meant you were a bad man, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I was wrong when I refused to listen to what you had to say. I love both you and Catherine. Will you marry me?" "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." "Of course, we will, Pa," chimed in Catherine. Richard laughed until tears filled his eyes. Surely, no man had ever been as happy as he was right then. He pulled Mattie and Catherine to him and embraced them tightly. Mattie would be his wife. And Catherine his daughter. He kissed Mattie squarely on the mouth. "Mrs. Richard Dixon," he murmured. "I'll even help out at the tavern," Mattie whispered into his ear. Richard shook his head. "No. You mustn't. Mattie, we must both be free to be ourselves." "But I might want to," she warned and kissed him on the cheek. Chapter 12. Mattie couldn't contain her grin as she followed Catherine and Rachel down the church aisle. The pews were full. The townsfolk had all come out for the ceremony. The end of each pew was decorated with bunches of evergreen branches. Mattie owed the women folk a lot of gratitude. Her eyes shifted to Richard standing at the altar. He winked at her. Mattie almost laughed aloud. There would never be a dull moment with her new husband. Her heart nearly burst with love when Richard bent and kissed Catherine and Rachel on their cheeks. Rachel, who was now nearly back to her old robust self, seemed to have adopted Richard as her second father. Richard's gaze returned to her. The rest of the world faded as they looked at each other. Mattie's heart pounded. In a few minutes, she would be Mrs. Richard Dixon. She had written to her folks everything that had transpired and told them she was to be married immediately. She had even boldly told them what Richard did for a living. She hadn't yet heard back. Richard took her hand. His touch sent shivers up and down her spine. They turned to face the preacher. He spoke of the love between a man and a woman and read from the scriptures. Then it was time to say their vows. Richard looked as though he would shed a tear as he spoke. When it was her turn, Mattie cried between her words. Preacher Roberts announced them to the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Dixon. I reckon we're joined for life now, Richard whispered to her. He clasped her hand tightly. I wouldn't have it any other way, Mattie said with feeling. The chatter of their guests rose around them. I'm surprised so many people came, Richard told her. It takes something big to change folks' opinions, Mattie said. To be honest, I can't believe Mr. and Mrs. Brown have eaten at your saloon. Ah, they had a good time and seemed to enjoy chatting with Flo. Richard laughed. I'm downright surprised about that. Mattie giggled. We should have had the reception at the saloon, she said with mischief in her voice. Mattie. You're scandalous. Richard teased her. Just then, Catherine and Rachel came to their side. Mattie admired their identical cream frilly dresses that Mrs. Parker, the town seamstress, had sewn for them. Ma, Rachel says you're gonna have a baby soon, Catherine said with a frown. I heard my ma say so, Rachel claimed, a defensive tone in her voice. Mattie hid a smile. Only the good Lord knows about those things, girls. I told you she wasn't, Catherine said to Rachel as they left. That's small towns for you, Richard said. Ah, they mean no harm. There's not much to do around here. I know, Mattie said. I see it as good wishes. I'd love to have our child. A little boy who looks just like his pa. Richard grew solemn. That would be a good thing, Mattie, but I'll tell you this, Catherine is ours and if we never have another, I'll remain a happy man. Why, I never thought I'd be called pa one day. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. Or husband. Mattie leaned into him. Husband, she whispered. Wife, he whispered back. The end. Thank you for listening to this heartwarming story by Susannah Calloway. You can be assured that all her books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Susannah Calloway, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Susannah Calloway Western romance.